Hello, my yarn smithing lovelies yet again. Here we are in my studio in central UK. It's really good to have you along. If you haven't seen me before, I'm Simon Henry, and this is where we gather to talk all things yarn and yarn craft. So if you've been watching the last few videos, you'll have seen that we had some, I'll say hate, it wasn't really intended as that, but people asking why I don't give away my patterns, both knitting and crochet, why I don't give them away for free, which I actually do. If you go over onto Love Crafts and go onto the designers section and search Simon Henry, you'll actually see there is a knitted tank there that I can't remember what it's called, Joy I think it's called, that's completely free for you to download from there. So yeah, you can, I do give away my patterns. The thing I don't do is I try, because I design for industry, I design for yarn companies, I design for manufacturers. Obviously we have a completely different pricing structure over there. They get the license then to use whatever I've done however they like. Once it's passed from me to them, the copyright is no longer with me. The copyright belongs to them because they've paid me for it. But of course that means I can then no longer sell those patterns. So the fee that I get from them would cover basically selling that pattern for years and years in single doses privately. So, you know, for the people who really think that I should, or they should be able to buy a pattern from me, and when that pattern says this is not for commercial use, what I mean by that is they can knit it for themselves, they can knit it for friends. You know, if a friend says, oh, that's a lovely cardie, will you knit that for me? Yeah, knit it for them. I've really got no issue with that at all. I do have an issue with knitting up those things in any quantity and selling them in either shops or markets, craft markets, whatever. The British law is very different from other laws. I directed people a couple of weeks ago to the government website where it actually specifically deals with copyright of knitting patterns. If it's there on the website, it must be an issue. So what they say is actually it's not illegal, it's not any breach of copyright to sell those things commercially once you've bought the pattern, even though there's a disclaimer on there. So copyright law has not been infringed. Contract law has. When you've bought that pattern, it's with a proviso that it is only for personal use. It's not for commercial use. So therefore, if you use that pattern for commercial use, when you've bought that pattern on the understanding that it isn't for that purpose, then you are in breach of contract law and you may be prosecuted under that particular law. So I hope that's made sense. So what I thought I'd do today, rather than particularly show you anything, even though I've got one or two little bits to look at, is explain to you the process by which we as designers write and publish a knitting pattern. So this isn't how we do it for industry when it's being manufactured. That's done in a slightly different way. When I'm designing for yarn companies and designing patterns, the process is exactly the same as when I'm doing it for myself, only I sell the pattern personally or the yarn company sells it on with the recommended yarn, etc. So number one, what happens is either the yarn company or I will go out in search of the particular yarn that I feel I want to use. If I'm designing a pattern for myself to sell those patterns, we switch around a little bit, because I usually start with what I want to actually design. Is it an Aran? Is it a double knit? Is it for men? Is it for women? Whatever. And I start with a sketch, or I've got a basic idea in my mind of exactly what I want to make, design. It doesn't always stay the same. It changes sometimes during the course. If it's from a yarn manufacturer, it's the other way around. They then send me the yarn first. So they have a new yarn, or they have a particular yarn that they want to promote, and they send me the yarn to work with, and I come up with usually more than one idea of how to use that particular yarn. So that's number one. That's the first thing that we do. So what are we going to do? What are we going to make? What are we going to make it in? So number two will be test swatches. So I'll be knitting up swatches on different needle sizes to see which creates the right density and weight of fabric. I can sometimes do 10 of those because I might do different stitches. For example, if I'm doing something in a very detailed cable, that will come out as a much denser fabric than if I was going to do that, say, in a lace stitch. So I would use different size needles to get the weight that I particularly want for that garment. Is it going to be, big and bulky? Is it going to be thin and drapey? I can do all of those things with the same yarn. It depends on the stitch pattern and the size needles that I'm using. So when I've come up with that, we then take measurements of those swatches before washing and after washing. Some yarn stays exactly the same before and after wash. Some yarn shrinks. Some yarn, for example, in the case of some acrylic and acrylic mixers, will actually get bigger when it's been washed. And especially, I've just done one, and when we finished a garment, we put it through all kinds of things that we shouldn't do. And it was just to see what's going to happen when you've done it at home, because you're not going to treat it according to the instructions on the label. I don't know anybody who actually does that. So I've just done a jacket, and it worked out really well, and I was really pleased with it. Before we grade it, we then put it through the testing process. We wash it and wear it and do all kinds of stuff. Are the buttonholes going to stay the same size? All kinds of stuff. And literally, I went back a week later, and the sleeves were nearly twice as long. I hung it up. The sleeves were nearly twice as long as they were when I started. I bet you've all been there. So that one is back to the drawing board. That's a lot of hours' work. And it didn't work. So that happens. It's just one of those things. It's part of the process. So when we've done test swatches and we've washed them, we've come up with a pattern that we like, we've come up with a needle size that we like, etc., etc. We then measure that, how many stitches and how many rows there are to whatever measurements we're working in. I'm still a bit old-fashioned. I work in inches. So we measure that. That gives us then an idea, obviously, how many stitches to cast on, how many rows to knit, etc., etc. So then when we've got that information, the next thing we want to know is the size of the garment that we're going to knit and the sizes that we're going to grade that garment into. We normally, when we're designing a pattern and we're writing it for somebody to use, we say we originate and other people duplicate. We normally start in the middle and we grade the pattern up and down according to whatever sizes that we're doing. So I'll then have a diagram of the sizing of the particular garment that we're going to knit. We've got to decide, before then, is it going to be loose? Is it going to be fitted? How much ease, we call it, again, it's going to put into that garment. And we end up with drawings of the shape of the garment with the measurements on what we want to do. Then we have to calculate, with using those measurements, how many rows we're going to knit, how many stitches we're going to cast on, etc., etc. Is there any shaping in it? How we're going to do that shaping? How we're going to do the armholes? Are they just, is it drop shoulder? Is it a set-in sleeve? Is it a raglan sleeve? All of those have their own set of calculations that we have to do to work out. For example, if it's a raglan, we're going to know the distance between here and underarm, and we know how many stitches are going to be in that section. We know how many rows they're going to be, and we know where we want it to finish. So we have to calculate how many or at what frequency we need to do the decreases to get the angle exactly right, so that we've got the right amount of stitches and the right amount of length from the underarm to the shoulder. Bear in mind that when we come to grade it, we have to do that for every single size that we're doing. So when we've done all that and we've calculated the numbers, we just call it, I call it doing my numbers. It's a thing that we call it. So when I've done the numbers, we then knit it. The first one is usually knitted by me, because I will come across any alterations that need to be made. I'll come across any difficulties. I'll come across, for example, if we're doing a raglan, does the pattern, if we're going to do a specific stitch pattern, does it work out with the decreases, etc., etc. When I've done that and I'm happy with it, we'll then, wash it, block it, do all the thing. If I'm happy and I like it, I send that, if it's for a yarn company, I'll then send that to the yarn company for they to have a look at. They might say, we don't really like it, or can we have it a bit longer? Can we have it a bit shorter? Can we have it, instead of a raglan, can we have a set-in sleeve? Whatever. That happens quite a lot. So then we come back, it's back to the drawing board. We start right from the very beginning with the calculations, and we do that all over again. After this has been back and forth a few times, or if I'm doing it for myself when I'm perfectly happy with it, then we grade it. So we do more numbers, because we have to do those numbers for every size we're going to use. When you see on a knitting pattern the numbers that's in the brackets, all of those have been calculated one at a time. Every single bracket throughout the pattern, that's all calculated. When that's been done, we then send those patterns out to test knitters. So the test knitters will each have a different size to knit, and what we do is then make sure that all of those sizes work. We make sure that the measurements are correct when it's been knitted. They usually go to different test knitters, because everybody's going to knit ever so slightly differently. Everybody's going to understand the pattern slightly differently. If there are any issues that come up, they will report those back to us. So then we have a look at those. If all the sizing works and if the patterns actually works, that pattern then goes to a pattern editor. In my case, I do all of those things myself when I'm doing it for me. So the pattern editor will then go through and check the abbreviations are correct, check there's no misprints in the pattern, check that, the brackets are where they're supposed to be, all those kinds of things. Sometimes a pattern editor will go through and say to me, this is too long. Can we, find a way of shortening these instructions a little bit? There are all kinds of ways that we can do that. And so then it comes back to me, and I have to make any adjustments to the pattern that they want as far as the numbers are concerned. It goes back to them, they look at it again, they edit it again, and finally we then have the approval either of the yarn company or of myself to publish that pattern So this could be 6 months. Quite often that is, sometimes longer. When I'm writing patterns for my Patreon lovelies, because we have, if you pop over to the Patreon site, you'll see over there, I actually design and write patterns that are only for my Patreon members. They're not for anybody else. They're always included in the membership over there. They can do, because they're paying me a monthly membership, that constitutes a license for them to use those patterns however they like. So they can sell those at craft markets or whatever. That's just for them. Effectively, by paying the Patreon membership over there, they become the client. They become who I'm, designing for and passing that over to. When they're no longer a Patreon member, that doesn't apply. Normal copyright and contract rules apply if they're not. So they can download that pattern. If they're no longer a member, they can't use it commercially, but they still can use those patterns for themselves. So when we've been through all of those things, and the pattern finally goes out, we have to hope that, number one, people are going to buy it, and number two, they're not going to abuse the amount of time I've spent on that. If I was doing that for industry, I'm paid very well for doing that. So they're not taking the mickey, we call it in the UK. They're not taking the mickey out of by buying it and then using that pattern commercially. I know people do. I know some people are a bit cheeky. I have had people join the Patreon site for just 1 month, download all of the patterns, and then cancel their membership. A month's membership on there is like £5. So they've got all of my patterns for £5. Nothing I can do about that, really. I just have to grin and bear it and just think, morally, I wouldn't do that morally. It's not very nice, and it just shows what kind of person you are. I'm not going to mention any names. I even had one that came back. She rejoined and downloaded some more patterns and then went away again. However, I digress. So I hope that's given you a small understanding of what's involved. I'm doing that at the moment. There was somebody actually on the comments that said, that only applies to knitting because crochet is really easy and they could copy any crochet pattern. The process is identical. The technique is different. We're just doing at the moment this, not been sewn together, we're doing a Tunisian crochet jacket over on the Patreon channel. The process is identical. I have to find the yarn, I have to design the pattern, I have to do the numbers. Makes no difference. The technique is different, but the process and buying the patterns and all that kind of stuff is exactly the same. So I hope that's given you, like I say, some insight as to what's involved. There was one particular lady who started all this off who said that anybody with even the smallest skill set could do what I do. They can look at a design and copy it, have a go, love. just see. Even doing the numbers, grade it into quite often 6 or 7 sizes, and just see how complicated that is, especially if you've got pattern panels that have to fit and all of that kind of stuff. I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but it's years and years of work, and study that kind of has led me to this stage of my career. And I must admit, when somebody suggests that, even somebody with a very small and very basic skill set can do what I do. You know, when it's taken me so long, maybe I'm dumb. Maybe somebody else can just do it straight away without thinking about it. Have a go. Have a go. So, moving on from that, I'm trying to think if we've had any hate that's worth talking about. We've had a bit more Temu stuff. Funnily enough, Temu have contacted me and asked me to do some things for them specifically. That's something I'm going to have to think about. So we did have one that is still going on about what Temu do to their sheep. All I say, and I've said it so many times on here, is just do your research. Ethically, morally, it's entirely up to you who you choose to buy from. So it turns out, you know, the reason that she's anti-Temu is that she's actually racist, is actually what it boils down to. It's nothing to do with, you know, where the yarn comes from, where the wool comes from, etc., etc. The vast majority of wool that China process is from Australia. I've said before, I had somebody say to me, why don't you buy Australian wool? It's really good and blah, blah. You know, don't buy Chinese. If I'm buying Australian wool, it's probably being processed in China. An awful lot of the yarn that you use, the two main processors of yarn, both man-made and natural fibres, either from China or from Turkey. So just do your research, just have a look, just look a bit deeper, rather than believe the rhetoric that is being put out by, you know, it was 2 vegan groups that contacted me. They're more than happy to wear acrylic that takes, you know, 200 years to break down in the environment when they throw it away. You know, and the microplastics that produces, you know, gets into the water supply. Animals drink that water, the wildlife drink that water with the microplastics in. But you're more than happy to do that, you know, and you won't wear sheep's wool that, you know, has to be sheared. You can't leave a sheep without shearing it, and that waste, you know, because they want us to just throw that away, that will break down in the environment within 6 months, and it's actually good for the environment's good for the ground and all kinds of stuff. Morally, ethically, you've got to make up your own mind. So that was that. I might do another Temu things. Now I've got kind of a lot more followers and things. Perhaps a lot of you haven't seen the research that I did back in the day on, you know, who Temu are. People say that, you know, it's the Chinese government. It's nothing to do with them. It's a private company. People say that, you know, Temu use child labour. Temu don't make anything themselves. It's a sales platform similar to Amazon and other sales platforms. So, you know, just don't believe everything that you see. Don't believe what I'm telling you. Actually, go and do your own research. Just have a look. It's quite easy. You know, when you Google something, don't just read the very first thing that comes up. Just look where that's come from, you know, and what they might be wanting to tell you. You know, do several bits of research and see, come to a conclusion yourself, and then you decide. It's up to nobody else to tell you where you should be buying your yarn from. You decide yourself. Maybe, you know, in certain circumstances, people feel that they might want to educate you. However, quite a few people in the comments think they know better. They know better than I do. You might, but it's up to me to decide. So anyway, that aside, the next few comments we had was about, if you see, I'm running another series alongside of this usual one, teaching people to knit. And I had quite a few people, say, oh, you're teaching them the English way, and the English way is wrong. That's wrong. You should be teaching people the continental way. Why? There are lots of other ways. Lots of other ways to knit. There's Portuguese knitting, there's Scandinavian do it slightly differently, there's all kinds of stuff. If you end up with a knitted garment at the end of it and you're comfortable doing it, who says? But clearly, I mean, I've been doing this for over 50 years, and clearly I've been knitting wrong all these years, and so did my mum, and so did my grandparents who taught me. It was actually my grandfather initially that was a knitter, and they all knit the same way as I do. So you knit the way that you're taught. I'm teaching people the way that I was taught. I'm not making it complicated. I'm making it as easy as I possibly can. Later on, we'll do lots of little additives. Today's video, like on there, we're doing increasing and decreasing. I'm going to get into trouble for that because I'm going to show people the simplest way of doing increases and the simplest way of doing decreases. People are going to say, oh, you should have a left slanting one and a right slanting one and all that kind of stuff. That will come later for people that are learning. Don't confuse them. I've had quite a few people in the comments say to me that they've really enjoyed what I'm doing so far because I've taken away the mystery. And knitting is really easy. It's really easy to knit. It's not a difficult thing to do at all. And people should be getting pleasure out of it. We shouldn't have the knit police, policing the way people are doing stuff. If it works for you, that's more than acceptable. So the people who are on there telling me I'm doing it wrong, make your own video. That's the way to do it. Just go off. Don't watch mine. Go off and do your own. I did wonder, actually, if these people were experts in knitting, why are they watching my video? And I think it's purely with the intention of criticising it. Don't care. Criticise all you want, love. That's what I say. So I think that's it. I can't think of any more. And there was one, I don't know if you watched last week, there was quite a funny one of a woman that said, she was talking about the AI generated thumbnails that are sometimes used on my channel. I explain why that is. And she said that she saw this very handsome, good-looking man with a ball of wool and some needles, knitting needles, and she thought, I'm going to click on that and see, this handsome man who's obviously knitting. And she says, imagine my disappointment when I clicked on the channel and saw you. Well, thank you very much. I had another one that said, yes, I thought the same. She says, in fact, I thought it was your very handsome husband that you were using the image of. It really is a pity. When we upload these videos, we have to declare if there's any like bad language or controversial subjects or whatever in. I might declare that once and just see what happens. I don't know quite what happens to that. I think it only goes out to adults only or something. I don't know. I might do that once and actually tell you exactly what I think. Still, in the meantime, it's been lovely to have you along yet again in my studio. It feels really nice inviting you in. So if you've liked the video, please like and subscribe. We're very nearly at 6,000 views, 6,000 subscribers rather, and 250,000 views. Like I've said before, I'm absolutely gobsmacked that 250,000 people or 250,000 times people have gone on the channel to watch some bald fat bloke knit and talk about yarn. However, it's really good to have you along. Thank you very much for your support, as always. Pop over to the Patreon channel, just have a little look what we're doing over there. The link's in the description if you want to go and have a look. And in the meantime, very much love as always. Happy yarn smithing, and I'm going to see you really soon. Bye.